Hey, party people. Today I am at YouTube Space LA. Da, 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 da. Woo! I just met Heidi for the first time in person today. We met 4 hours ago. We're already talking about poop and sex scandals.
Awesome sauce.
Those are the only really important things in life, I think.
Food. I like food.
Okay, so let's talk about stuff we teach. So once upon a time, Heidi emailed me and said, "Hey, Zoe, I seen your stuff on the internet because I'm your internet stalker, and we should stalk each other, and we should collaborate on some stuff because we have some overlap. And we are shooting a collaboration. Okay, this video, we're gonna go really quick into me drawing a sketch, and we're gonna do it really quick because y'all have seen me draw things before. This is not very exciting for you guys. And then we're gonna move into Heidi showing you how to take a sketch, a loose marker sketch, and turning it into a technical flat in Adobe Illustrator. And she's going to show you all kinds of cool tricks. And so we're going to move into that after the bit of me drawing. Who's excited? I'm excited. Heidi's excited. My brother back there is excited. Everyone at YouTube Space is excited.
YouTube
Trust.
HQ.
Yeah. So stick around, watch, me and Heidi do our thing.
So I'm just drawing a design that I didn't really think about in advance. And looking back, I feel like I should have. But I didn't. And truth be told, I did one before. Like when we were on set, I did one. And we were all looking at it. It's like, this is boring. Let's do something a little bit more exciting. And so this is the second design I did. And I just really wanted something dramatic with big shapes and something that just had a lot of flair in the sketch. Because I think designers who start designing on the figure, they really get into the shapes of things before they start thinking about fine tuning and, creating little intricate details. And so I kind of wanted to go with that whole feeling, and I started drawing all these super dramatic shapes. So when I do a big sketch like this, I use light colors. I freehand a figure. I start off really light. Like normally I start off even lighter than I am now. I'm drawing a little bit darker for the camera to pick it up, but I will do like super light pencil or like a 10% gray that you can barely see for the underdrawing. And then I will go in with a much darker pencil or pen or ink or what have you. Right now, I'm just using a Prismacolor black marker. I had previously used a 20% cool gray and a 40% cool gray.
Just going to have the gathers in the front, pockets, because y'all know how I feel about pockets. We're going to put in that side seam because she's a 3/4 pose. She's got a side seam on the bodice. Front darts. They should probably be longer than that. Oops. Little bust dart there. There would be one on the other side if she wasn't so 3/4. I'm going to put in a little drape line because she's pulling on that pocket there. I occasionally like the juxtaposition of a really girly dress with a really powerful pose. Number one pet peeve of front view feet is when people draw the feet like there isn't a distinct left and right. Like they put this point in the middle so you can't tell if it's a left foot or a right foot. Go watch my how to draw feet video. Give me a left foot and a right foot. Now we're going to make Heidi flathead. Let's see how she does. She's going to be great.
Let's
I
see.
can tell already.
All right, you guys, I am going to start sketching Zoe's sketch, and I'm just going to start in Illustrator, and I'm going to drop it in, and I just took a picture with my cell phone because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very honest that I do not hand sketch, and so if I'm drawing anything, I start with some type of reference image, whether it's a hand illustration or a photo that I found online or a picture I took in real life. I drop it in Illustrator, and I use it as a reference. So we can do that by coming up to File, Place, and we will browse the image out on our desktop. And again, I just took this with my iPhone, so no fancy technology here. I didn't scan it on any big fancy scanner. I took it with my iPhone and I emailed it to myself. So I always embed the image. I have a whole tutorial on embedded versus linked images, but if you get an error when you bring an image into Illustrator and then later you open that Illustrator file and it says cannot find embedded linked file, check out that other tutorial because it shows you exactly how to work with embedded versus linked images. And I have 2 illustrations here, and I'm going to go with the vertical one because it's a little bit more straight on. So I'm going to take this, cover my layers panel, and I'm just going to lock the layer. Some people like to turn it into a template layer. I don't really work with template layers. I just lock them and turn them on and off. So that's a personal preference. And then I'll create a new layer to start sketching on. And the first thing I'm going to do after I've done that is I'm going to drop a guide. And so something I talk a lot about in flats is that you only have to draw half of it. And then most of the time the garment is symmetrical. Even if it's not symmetrical, it's symmetrical enough that we can draw half of it, we can mirror it, and then we can make any changes that we need to on the other side. So we only have to do half the work. So I always drop a guide, Command R to open my rulers, and I can pull a guide directly out from that. So I'll pull a guide from the rulers on the left. And Zoe drew this a little bit 3/4 for me. Thank you, Zoe, for not giving me a flat on sketch. It's a little bit of a challenge, I'm not going to lie. This is not the way I'm used to working. But I'll just drop a guide roughly in the middle, and then I'm just going to kind of wing it from there. So I actually might pull this over a little bit on the center front of the neckline and kind of start from there to do that first sleeve. And I do want to make sure that my guides are locked. So view, guides, lock guides, because I don't want to accidentally bump that around while I'm drawing. And then as far as the drawing tool of choice, you guys can draw with the pen tool or the pencil tool. I am definitely a pen tool fan. I do draw with the pencil tool sometimes, but I'm going to draw with the pen tool for parts of this. I might switch back and forth. And I often start out drawing in some type of bright color as my stroke, not in black, because it can be hard as you're tracing the illustration, depending on what color the garment is underneath. If you draw in black on black, it's really hard to kind of see what you're doing. So we'll change our stroke color, and then I'll just...
That's smart. Why didn't I never think of that?
Yeah?
It's one of those like little simple things that are like game changer.
All right, and I think I'm going to fumble through this illustration a little bit, you guys. So that's one of the things that I love about Illustrator is that we can kind of fumble and we can always come back and fix it later. The other thing is that I'm not going to teach all the intricacies of like how exactly the pen tool works because I have a million other videos on that and it just takes too long to explain. So we're going to talk a little bit more about conceptually how I'm going to look at and approach taking this 3/4 view illustration and turning it into a straight on flat. So I'm going to draw the bodice first, and I'm just going to kind of be sloppy here with the armhole because the sleeve is going to come over that. And it's a pretty fitted, let's see, so I want to give her a little bust there. And it's a pretty fitted, whoops, oh, and my space bar got a little crumb under it, so it's a little bit cranky right now. And I'm not going to fuss too much at the beginning. I want to just try to get the general silhouette, and then I'll come back and we can work on making it look a little bit nicer later. And this is way too skinny. I just realized where that's hitting on my center front line. She would be very, very anorexic. Okay. So now we're going to draw this really voluptuous skirt. And that's probably a bit too much. So we're just going to nudge that anchor point over. And again, this is not the type of garment that I draw very often. But that's part of the challenge with this, right? And so I'm going to reconnect here, and I'm going to come to the center front. And I like to hold the shift key when I do this. Drop that center front anchor point. That gives me a really nice handle that goes perfectly horizontal. And so when I join those 2 anchor points at the bottom, I don't get that weird little V butt shape. And I have a tutorial specifically on avoiding that V butt shape in your illustrations because that's something that people fight with a lot. All right, so we have our basic shape for the bodice and the skirt. And then we're going to come in, and thank you, Illustrator, for giving me that zoom to selection, which I really dislike. I heard that they're going to take it away from us. That would be awesome. So I'm going to disconnect from all those paths, and I want to think about how to draw this sleeve.
So mean.
This was a little mean, I'm not going to lie. But here, yeah, no, we're going to do this. Okay, so I've done some cool stuff with pleats, and we're going to see how this works for a sleeve. I've done it for like a pleated skirt before, but we're going to see how it works. So what we can do is we can take our pen tool.
I was just trying to make it interesting.
No, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And we're going to make it teensy, teensy, tiny. No. This is a good challenge. Okay, so I take this V here, and I'm going to hold the Option or Alt key, and I'm going to click Shift to drag this over. Okay, and so I'm going to take both of these, and I'm going to do a blend. Object, blend, make, and I'm going to zoom in here, and then I'm coming to my blend, object, blend, blend options. I'm going to turn on my preview. I'm going to turn on specified steps. I'm going to jump this up until I start to get where I don't see that end of the pleat line. I want it to disappear into the vertical pleat line. Okay, so something like that. All right, so then I hit OK, and that looks pretty good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the warp effect. So we're going to come up to Effect, Warp. And this is a dialog I always kind of have to choose one and then turn the preview on and then see which one I want. I don't use it enough that I remember every time which one I want, but I'll turn my preview on, and I definitely don't want, let's see, I think I do want the horizontal arc.
God, this thing is amazing.
Is that blowing your mind?
Yeah.
But now I have to think about how to get this really tight into the top of the armhole. So let me think about this. And I think what we need to do, the cool thing with this is that it's still totally dynamic. So I can choose OK. And then if I turn into preview mode, Command or Control Y, this is still just made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 anchor points, 2 points and 6 anchor points. And so what I can do is I can say, you know what, the pleats look a little bit, they got too wide, right, for the illustration. So I'm going to bump that anchor point over 1, and I'll select this anchor point and bump that anchor point over 1, and then Command Y to jump back. And now you can see that I lost, that's too much spacing. And so what I can do is I'll just select this, come back up to Object, Blend, Blend Options. And again, since I didn't expand the artwork, I still have the ability to access the blend as well as the warp. So this is all like super, super dynamic. Again, which is one of the things that we love about Illustrator. So I can bump this up, and I'm just bumping the specified steps and my blend options up. And perhaps that's too much, or perhaps it's not, but we definitely want to change a few things. So first of all, I think that I need to make the path longer, and let me think about how we're going to do this. If you want to change the warp, you come into your appearance panel. So window appearance, if it's not already open, and select that. Here we go. Warp. And let's see. Okay, so here we're getting a little bit closer. And then I think what we're going to do is I'm going to grab these 2 anchor points and I'm going to bump them in. So I'm just grabbing the 2 anchor points at the top of that warp and bumping them in. And then we wouldn't have it be totally dense like that, and we almost want a little bit of a curve coming out rounded. So if I grab my anchor point tool, I can round that out a little bit. And round this out a little bit. And I think that overall, this is still coming out way too big. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. I'm going to grab just this pleat on the right-hand side. I'm going to bump it closer together. And then our pleats now got too close. So we're going to come back in. And this is, I mean, if I were to have practiced this and showed you guys just the finished practice, I would have calculated exactly how many steps I needed to do. But this is like a really new type of pleat shape that I'm making, so it's really just a trial and error. And it's never perfect science. So everybody's like, well, how many steps should I do? And it's like, I don't know how many steps you should do. It's not a perfect science, as I said. So now I'm going to reselect these shapes, and we're going to do something. I'm going to change the layer setting to green so we can see the paths a little bit better. But now my pleats are too close, so I'm going to have those selected, and I'm going to come back into my blend options. So again, object, blend, blend options, turn my preview on, and now we're going to space that out a little bit more. Okay, so that looks better. And then the thing I thought was going to happen did happen. It got too dense at the top, so our stroke weight needs to be a little bit smaller. So we could go down to like maybe a 0.5, and maybe that looks better. And I think what I'm going to do is I'll probably put a clipping mask on this. And we're still getting some weird stuff happening down here with our pleats. So a couple things we can try. We can come over to our stroke panel, and we can round the cap, and then let's change our blend setting one more time. So here's the thing, you're gonna fuss with this whether you're doing this using the blend options and the warp, or you're gonna fuss with this if you tried to draw it from scratch by hand. I would much prefer to fuss with it using the blend and the warp because I can just go in there and change a few settings and I get to change the whole illustration like on a global scale, versus if I have a million anchor points and a million paths and I'm trying to edit and tweak all of those. I find that a little bit more challenging. Arguably, you could have like really just drawn this a little bit more organically by hand, and that's really a personal preference how you want to illustrate this portion of the garment.
I think that especially people who watch a lot of these tutorials, they think that, you know, I need to follow these steps to get to this result. And of course, that is how you learn things. But at the same time, there's an importance to trying to figure some stuff out for yourself. Because you're not really going to understand how kind of like these sort of like touch sensitive tools like warp and blending are going to work unless you're actually fussing with it yourself. Because if you say, oh, just input this number, you don't really understand what that number means. The next time they want to do a similar pleat but not exactly that one, what are they going to do?
Okay, now we're going to put this on the bodice. We're going to see what happens. And so let me think about this because it's definitely coming way too far into the bodice. And so we can, if I rotate this, I start to change the dimensions. So at this point, we could say, all right, I'm going to expand this. But if I'm going to expand it, before I ever expand anything, I make a copy of it, not expanded, so I can always go back and edit it. So I'm going to just hold the Option or Alt key. I'm going to copy that over to the side. And I just kind of push that stuff off the side of my artboard, and I leave it there. And so now I can come in here, and I can come up to Object, Expand Appearance. Okay, and so now I have all my individual anchor points in my paths that I can start to mess with. And so now if I want to rotate this, I'm not losing the integrity of the, not losing, but I'm affecting the appearance of the warp, which was not what I wanted to do. And I think that the whole sleeve is still crazy wide at the bottom. So we're actually going to delete that. We're going to come back over here. And I knew when I was watching Zoe draw this, I was like, this is going to take me some fussing with to make this work. But I actually like to show that because, as Zoe said a second ago, it's not a perfect science. It's not, okay, you draw this rectangle that's 3 inches by 2 inches, and then you rotate it 19 degrees, and then magic, you have it. Every garment's completely different. Every project's completely different. And so you have to learn that, you know what, sometimes it's an experimental process and you have to fuss with the tools a little bit. And I don't say fuss, maybe experimental is a little bit better of a term to use than fuss. And so
I could see it.
Argue it both ways.
But yeah, I would go with experiment. Yeah.
It just depends what kind of spin you want to put on it. And so now I'm mocking it up more directly on the illustration, and that's giving me a better idea of like how wide do I actually really want to show the sleeve. And I'm still going to make this a little bit narrower. All right, so now I think we're getting more into the neighborhood that we want it to be. And now let's affect the pleats. So we could do a couple things. I could just come in here and grab each of these individual anchor points. And I'm going to turn my smart guides off. So Command or Control U, because that is fighting with me. And so now instead of adjusting the blend, I'm just adjusting this individual anchor point. so that it fits a little bit better. And we can come back and change those ones later if we want, since they're overlapping a little bit. So I think that's looking better. So let's make a copy of this. We'll take this, Object, Expand Appearance. And now, I think this is going to work much better. Okay, so I'm just rotating this a little bit into the bodice. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to fix these. So some of it is, you know, manual adjustment. As much as we have these tools like the warp and the blend, sometimes you're pushing pixels. Speaking of pixels, you're pushing anchor points. I mean, is it looking as terrible as I feel like it's looking?
No.
It's not?
I do not mind if you blame me for things.
I do activewear and golf clothes, so pleats are not really happening in that industry. Okay, so there is the rough sleeve, and I'll like cut that top part of the sleeve off because I realize it's looking really awkward, but I want to get going a little bit more on some of the front bodice. Okay, so we have a couple darts. We have a dart coming up here. And I'm just going to draw a path with my pen tool. And I'm going to come in here. And with the path selected, I'm going to come to the bottom of my stroke panel. And instead of a uniform stroke profile, I'm going to choose Width Profile 4. And what that does is it just sort of shows the width going from very thick at the bottom to very thin at the top. And I feel like for darts, I really like that. Instead of having a flat blunt edge or a rounded edge at the end of a dart, I really like doing the width profile for darts. It just adds a little bit more dimension. Okay, so the next thing we have is we have we have pleating or gathering at the center front waist, and we also have a pocket. So let's draw the pocket first. And it's just a kind of a J pocket, but I'm just going to draw this, not super J. Okay, and I might change my stroke weight on that to be 0.5, a little bit daintier than the outline. And then we've got all this gathering that's coming down here from the center front. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could use, some people like to use the pen tool, some people like to use the pencil tool. I actually will do the pencil tool for this, although I won't lie, since I am drawing on a trackpad, which I do draw 98% of the time on a trackpad, not an external mouse. But if I'm using a pencil tool, I do like to use a mouse, so we'll see how this comes out. The other thing that I tell people when they're using the pencil tool is that you want to really think about how zoomed in or how zoomed out you are. So if you're drawing a really fine detail, you want to be zoomed in. If you're trying to draw these really nice, like sweeping lines, you're not like really close on the sketch because they're going to come out too hard and too jagged, even if you have your fidelity settings to smooth. So zoom out if you want to get these really nice long sweeping lines. And so on that note, we will check our fidelity. We'll double click on the pencil tool and we're going to bump it up one setting almost all the way to smooth. And then we're just going to take the pencil tool and we are going to draw a bunch of paths coming down. Now I want to be careful that when I draw a new path, I'm not hovering too close to the existing path that I'm going to be affecting that or reattaching to it. I want to draw a path brand new. And since these pleats and gathers are really, really close to each other, I'm going to double click on this tool and I'm going to uncheck Keep Selected. And so what that's going to do is that as I draw, it's not going to keep the path selected. So I have a lot more freedom. I don't have to be really fussy about where I'm dropping the next path. And so again, you know, some of these are coming out a little bit misshapen. I'm doing this on my trackpad, but that's okay. And we're just going to try to be really organic about this. And this is the awkward part where like right in the center front, you want to make sure the lines aren't like making this round shape. And so I might, you know, not reflect all of these. I might do a little bit more manual right on the center front, so that it has a little bit more of an organic feel. Sometimes if you perfectly reflect these type of organic lines on your illustration, it doesn't give you the look that you want. It looks almost a little bit too, maybe too structured. And so the other thing that I definitely will do with these paths, I'm just going to select all of them here, is that I will change the stroke profile again. So you can do the width profile 1 is really nice. It goes from really skinny to thick in the middle to skinny at the bottom, but this is not really how the illustration is done. They're thick at the top and thin at the bottom, and so I think that width profile number 4 is going to be better. Now mine worked out that the thick portion of the path is at the top and the thin portion of the path is at the bottom, but that's because of the directionality that I drew the path. If your path is showing that the thick is at the bottom and the thin's at the top and it's not coming out right, you can change the width profile at the very bottom of the stroke panel by just flipping that so that it pushes the thick portion and the thin portion to opposite sides. And so now let's come in here, and I'm just going to take these and I'm going to make sure that they all come directly out of the waistline. Because I'm kind of fussy like that. I like all the ends of the path to kind of run into the path that they are supposed to be coming out of. So that's just a little tedious process of mine that I'm particular about. All right, so now we're getting somewhere, and let's go ahead and turn off our background layer and see what's starting to happen. So it's looking okay. Some of these I wish like weren't kind of overlapping so much. So I can kind of come in and I can fuss with this however I want. I can grab the pencil tool, and that's the beauty of the pencil tools. I can select any given path and I can just kind of reshape this. And again, if you're zoomed in too close, it starts to get awkward, but that wasn't too bad. And maybe it's fine. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, I don't like to overfuss when I'm not too close. I don't like to overfuss before I get too close to the end because it can be hard to see. You over tweak on things that once you finish the whole illustration, you're like, oh, you know what? It's not that bad. It doesn't look that bad once I kind of got the whole thing done. All right, so let's finish the sleeve here. And I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to use a clipping mask to kind of round this out at the top. And what I mean by just using a clipping mask is I'm just going to draw a shape that covers the entire sleeve, except I've sort of made this, and I didn't do a very good job making that nice and soft and round at the top. So we could come in with the pencil tool and reshape this if we wanted. Okay, but let's change the stroke color so you can actually see what's happening. I've just drawn a shape because I want to mask out the top of these paths here that create the top of the pleats on the sleeve. And so I take this shape here, and I'm going to just select this, and I Command or Control 7 or Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And so if you're not familiar with clipping masks, you're basically just, you're kind of cropping it, but you're not. You're actually masking it. So you haven't actually deleted any of the artwork. It's still there. You've just kind of hidden it with another shape. And again, I have another whole tutorial on that. So now I'm just going to bump this and to align it with the top of the neckline there. The other thing that I want to do is that I want to fill this in with a background color, because in reality, we would not see through the pleats. We would not see the bodice through there. I mean, I guess I could fill it with white, or I could delete this portion of the bodice. Deleting that portion of the bodice would definitely be easier. So we're going to do that. In my opinion, this is not the best way to do it. I would rather fill the pleats with white, but my brain is a little bit stuck right now on the best way to do that. So I'm going to just delete those anchor points. And we can make this nicer here. So we'll take this, we'll give it a round cap, and we'll just pull it down. There we go. Okay, so now I need to draw a dart on the bust. So I'll just grab my pen tool and do that. And then again, come over to my stroke panel and change the width profile to width profile 4. All right, so that looks good. Now, I guarantee you something's going to happen. This happens every time I draw half of an illustration when I'm not actually drawing it on top of like a real garment, like a photograph of a garment that looks like standard dimensions. My waists always come out like super, super crazy skinny. And I notice that when I reflect. So what I do is I select all of my artwork, and I can come up to Object, Transform, Reflect. Otherwise, I can use the Reflect tool. Hotkey is letter O. I can hover over the center front guide, hold the Option key, and I can Option or Alt click if you're on a PC right along that center front guide, and that will reflect right along that center front axis. I'll go ahead and hit Copy instead of just OK. And look at how skinny mini she is. She's like crazy tiny. And I don't know what it is about like my eye or what, but every time I do an illustration like this, that happens. And so instead of starting over, I'm going to look at a couple things. One is that I feel like the shoulder width is plenty wide. It's really the waist that got super, super narrow. So I'm going to delete the reflection that I just made. I'm going to fix this. So the first thing I need to do is we're just going to move the sleeve over. And I'm going to use my direct selection tool. I'm going to select everything. Let's see, let me think about how I want to do this. I want to select, I actually might use my lasso tool. So the hotkey letter is O. I'm going to just come through here. I'm going to select a bunch of these anchor points. And I might wind up kind of redoing some of these paths along the skirt portion that create that gathering. I'm just going to use my arrow key and I'm going to bump this over till she's not so terribly anorexic. And then I can take my direct selection tool and move some of these anchor points to kind of distribute these gathers. And I might wind up adding more later, but let's see how that looks. So now I have to fix my pocket and move the gather here because the gather would not be in the pocket. And we'll take our sleeve and we'll bring it back. And instead of having it so far out this time, I'm actually going to rotate the entire thing. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of realign it up here. Whoops, there we go. All right, so now let's see how this works. So we'll take our side seam and we'll move it up there, move our bust dart over. Let's see, we gave her a little bit more of a realistic body. We'll grab our reflect tool again. We will Option or Alt click along the center front. And there we go. That's looking much better. She actually looks like she has a little bit of a waist and she isn't super corseted. So I'm going to readjust this path here to kind of come into the sleeve a little bit nicer. And I'll do the same over on this side. I could have done that before I reflected. That would have been the easier way to do it, but I didn't. So we'll just do it on each side. Grab this path and move it in there. Okay, now, whoops. I'm going to turn off my guide. So View, Guides, Hide Guides, and let's see what we have. It's not looking terrible. I don't really like what's happening right here, which I said happens earlier. So some of these lines, these gather lines along the bodice, or excuse me, the skirt portion, I knew I was going to have to redraw some of these. I don't necessarily have to redraw them though. I could just grab the anchor point that's at the top and I can move it. I didn't like how they got all like crossed over each other and they looked like they're like woven together. That's not the look to emulate these sort of gather lines. But sometimes this is just a little bit more of a manual adjustment after you have, I don't like how that one looked either. So again, this is where we're just kind of pushing pixels until this looks good. If you use a Wacom, which I don't because I'm not a hand sketcher and so it's actually really hard for me to draw with a Wacom, this process might be a little bit easier for you to draw all these gather lines. But for me, and I suppose even if you don't know how to draw, maybe that still is the easier way, but I just don't use a Wacom, so that's just not how it's happening. So that's just not how it's happening. Okay, so let's see what we have here because I feel like we're getting close. So she has these crystal pleat sleeves. She has two darts coming up from the waist, two waist darts, the bust dart on either side. She has a pocket, and she's got the gathers along the center front. So that's looking pretty good. Zoe didn't draw any stitching on there, so I'm not going to do any top stitching. I'm assuming there's maybe not any top stitching happening. The other thing that I would do, though, is I would close these paths because I don't like having the sketch sort of broken in half. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. I'll select these two anchor points, Command or Control J. Really cool trick if you have two anchor points and they're not quite touching and you want to join them and you don't want an anchor point and another little path and then an anchor point, you can come up to Object, Path, average, and then you can do object path join. Otherwise, you can use the shortcut, which is Command Option Shift J. This is not available as a drop down, but this is the shortcut to average and join in one step. Option Command Shift J. It is a handful, literally. And we will do that for this path along here. And I might turn on, there we go. Oh, and I've got these other anchor points that are just hitting right there, so I'm going to move those out of the way. Okay, I want that anchor point and that anchor point. So instead of doing Command J and then having a little gap in there, I'm going to do again Option Command Shift J, which average and joins them, so it'll merge them together into one single anchor point. And then we will come down to the bottom, and that's an easy one to do. We'll just select both of those again, Option Command Shift J, join those. Turn off our preview, Command or Control Y. And now we've got our illustration. Pretty funky garment that Zoe drew for me. Pretty fun design.
That design is insane.
It is kind of insane. What do you think where we ended up? It's unique. I think one thing, I don't think that I think I have my gathers are coming out too far towards the pockets. Do you think?
Yeah, you could delete a few of those.
Yeah, there we go.
That does look better.
That looks better. I think that's a better interpretation of what you did. And we have this guy over here that we didn't expand, but there's the illustration. What do you think about the interpretation, Zoe? Oh, wait, last step.
The flat looks great. I just think my design was like, I mean, I didn't even think about it. I just like, let's draw shapes. Let's draw big shapes, blah, blah, blah.
No, it was a really fun challenge for me. This is like super out of my wheelhouse. The last thing I'm going to say that we can do here is I want to select all this. I want to change it to black. So we're looking at it in red. And when you change it to black, that always helps a little bit. Actually, I want to do two tricks. One is we're going to change it to black. And since I have some clipping masks in here, I'm getting the question mark on my stroke color. So now I could change this to black, but then what that's going to do is it's going to change the outline of the mask to black. So I'm going to undo that. Instead of doing that, I'm going to come up to, and I actually have a hotkey labeled for this, a custom keyboard shortcut that I made for this, but I'm going to do the recolor artwork option, which is under Edit, Edit Colors, Recolor Artwork. I have Command Shift C assigned to that. And what we can do is we can just double click on this icon here in the new dialog, in the new column, excuse me, and we can just change everything to red in one swoop. So that works great if you have red and fill and in stroke positions and you just want to globally change everything to black or whatever other color we could have changed it to. So there's our beauty.
In quotes.
Beauty. All right, so we just converted to black and she's looking better. What I want you guys to take away from this video is that, again, using these techniques with an Illustrator, it's not a perfect science. I see so many tutorials out there. I will not name any sites that I see them on where they show you exactly number of pixels, exactly number of degrees that you should rotate. And yeah, you can create and you can mock up that perfect thing right then and there on the spot. But then when it comes to trying to interpret some crazy thing that Zoe Hong sketches for you, you're stuck and you have no idea how to do it. So a whole portion of the process of working in Illustrator is experimenting and knowing that you can always edit, undo, you can always move the anchor points, move the paths, move the lines, and that's one of the things I love about the software is that it's so dynamic and it's, you know, it's one of the more freedoms versus hand sketching. If you're sketching with pencil, you can obviously erase, but you can't, once you drop that marker, there's no edit, undo, there's no moving that path over. So get in there and play around with it, don't get too stiff with it, and just have fun and experiment and see what you get. All right,
Thanks,
that was kind of
Heidi.
long-winded.
Who learned 681 new things? I did. Okay, did you take notes? You should have taken notes. The beautiful thing about YouTube is if you didn't take notes, you can just watch this video all over again.
Rewind.
Just get to the good stuff. It's like, Zoe, you're boring. Let's watch the new person. Okay, so if you are interested in learning more about Illustrator, Heidi is the best person to ask. So go stalk her channel, go stalk her social media. I'm going to drop all the links in the description box below. If you like this kind of collaboration video or just me in general,
How could you not?
don't make them start thinking about reasons. I right, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share with your friends who are struggling with Illustrator. And you know what I'm going to say next. Hashtag practice, not magic. Hashtag if your first one sucks, you're right on track. Hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag I'm so tired, Zoe. It's finals week and I don't want to do anything. Hashtag do it anyway.